Should I introduce myself first?
That would be good, yes.
So I am Lisa Bressman. I am a professor of law at Vanderbilt Law School. I have been here, believe it or not, my entire academic career, which is now, I think, 22 years, exactly the same amount of time as my son is old. Not to say that I haven't visited at other law schools or considered moves, but the thing about Vanderbilt Law School is it has managed to always bring me back, and I'll explain a little bit of that to you in a moment. How did I get here? Well, my early experience is Wellesley College, a couple of years at an investment bank, Chicago for law school, University of Chicago for law school. Then I clerked for Judge Cabranes, who sits on the Second Circuit. And then I clerked for Justice Breyer on the Supreme Court in his very first year on that court. So that was pretty exciting. And from there, I went to a law firm, a little boutique in Washington, D.C. that specializes in telecommunications law. And from there, I made a jump into the Department of Justice. And I worked in the Office of Legal Counsel, which is an amazing, amazing office and was a wonderful job. And from there, I came into the academy. How did I end up at Vanderbilt? I ended up at Vanderbilt because a couple of Vanderbilt law professors who actually no longer teach at Vanderbilt came to Washington, D.C. to recruit Supreme Court clerks. That was a practice back in the day. People would go straight from their Supreme Court clerks into the academy. That was not my path, but I happened to be on the market and I happened to be in D.C. So I had the good fortune of meeting with them, and really we spend more time, I think, than the sort of typical initial interview at most schools. And so I really had this warm impression. And when I was seriously considering schools among the options that I had after I'd been going through the process, partly chose Vanderbilt because my husband went to Vanderbilt undergrad. So he could fill us in on the kind of academic community we were looking at and the kind of family lifestyle we could hope for. Nashville's changed a ton, like it's not even recognizable from that perspective. I like to say we didn't even have a Starbucks, which sounds dumb, but I came from Washington, D.C., where there was literally a Starbucks on every corner. Like you didn't have to cross the street to get your cup of coffee. To Nashville, where there wasn't even a Starbucks. There was no major mall. There was nothing that makes a city, and Nashville is a city, recognizable as one. And now today, everybody wants to come to Nashville, and it's great to already be here. So the questions you asked me were about what I teach and was it why I like to teach them or?
Yeah, it's why you like to teach them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I teach, as Bobby mentioned, the regulatory state, which is a first year class that I had a hand in designing. Now back a dozen years ago, it's hard to believe. It is a mandatory first year course at Vanderbilt and some other schools as well. And we think that it is incredibly important in the first year, though it is not part of the law school curriculum that was established by, Langdell in the year 1900 or 1920, whatever it was. The regulatory state introduces students to statutory interpretation, administrative law, legislatures, executive branch governance, agency regulation, and it does so in a sort of sophisticated way, but not in such a sophisticated way that you need more law school to understand it. It's actually full of building blocks that you take with you from that first year class into all of your subsequent classes. It really helps because many classes involve interpreting statutes. It really helps because there's administrative law shot through much of what you learn. And this is true of your practice as well. And it doesn't matter whether you're a government lawyer whether you work for a private law firm or nonprofit, no matter where you are, no matter where your client is, they will at some point interface with an agency or its regulations. And so you, as a student, having come through Vanderbilt and having come through the regulatory state course in your very first year, know something about what's being put in front of you. And it really gives you an advantage just to have a familiarity with something called a regulation, what it looks like, how to understand it, even where you would find it. So we are very committed to the regulatory state class. And in fact, I am one of 3 co-authors here at Vanderbilt who wrote the casebook. There used to be only 2 casebooks, and there are more, but still the 2 leading casebooks, I believe, and I hope I'm not overspeaking, are ours at Vanderbilt and then another at Harvard. And we're very proud, both here and elsewhere, to have made this course really take hold. So I'm very, very passionate about the regulatory state and teaching it in the first year. And I love teaching first years. But in Reg State are all the components of my research interests. So in the upper level curriculum, I teach administrative law, and that's a much more sort of, I don't know, complex, I hate to use words like that. It's a much more in-depth exploration of administrative law than you get in regulatory state. Regulatory state is sort of the greatest hits, and administrative law are all the particulars. And I strongly believe that you need both, or you should have both before you graduate from law school. And I love teaching administrative law in the upper level classes. I also teach currently a seminar called Behind the Curtain of the Supreme Court. Now, that started out as something like a book club. So we read popular books on the Supreme Court. So we read books written by journalists about the Supreme Court. We read books written by justices themselves about their life experience, bringing them to the court. We view movies, and we consider the way in which the Supreme Court is presented to the public and compare it with the way in which we have understood the Supreme Court and its function in law school. So I say book club because we're reading popular books and we're asking what the impression is of the court to the public, but really it's evolved. It's evolved over time into a much broader, to me, more interesting discussion of the role of the Supreme Court and its legitimacy. And these are issues, of course, that are right on the face of any media source, and even social media source that you look at. So questions of the Supreme Court and its legitimacy have become particularly relevant. And though those are questions that loom large and overarch much of the constitutional law or public law classes and discussions we have in law school, we take a step back in the seminar or a step up in the seminar to consider those kind of meta-level theoretical questions about how the court fits in our democracy and how perhaps that role has changed over time. So that is what I'm currently teaching. In the past, I've also taught constitutional law. I've taught a class on the religion clauses, so you can see that my interests, my passions lie on the public law side of what we do in law school. My writing, because I think classwork should have some synergy with writing. That's when you see a professor at the front of the room who's really excited about the material, partially because that's what they do when they sit and they write. They think about these issues and they have the opportunity to come into the classroom and learn from students and share their sort of interest and excitement about what's in front of them. So my writing has been about statutory interpretation and administrative law, and it's also been about presidential control of agencies and the role of separation of powers. So what I do is incredibly exciting to me, and I hope to my students when I bring it into the classroom, because I continue to ask myself the questions that I think a lot of us, particularly lawyers and law students, want to talk about when it comes to thinking about our Constitution and our democracy. So that's a lot. And you can see that I can talk forever about what I do, and I can talk forever about why I do it here at Vanderbilt.
I mean, I can concur. Reg State was so helpful, and just understanding statutory interpretation just takes you so far in the rest of your classes. And it was actually very helpful this summer with the Celia case and the DACA case. I'm curious, I think I remember you saying something about Celia. Did you do some research on that this summer?
I did. I wrote an online piece for the University of Chicago Law Review. Many of the law reviews have online companions, and there was a small symposium on that case. And so I had the chance to write a short piece about it and see it published in real time. So that was exciting. That's what Bobby's talking about.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting summer for Reg State. And as I was reading through the cases, I just kept remembering all the lessons you taught us. So that was really cool. I know you touched a little bit on your research, but can you tell us what kind of brought you to that area of research? Was it a course in law school, or was it just something you were always interested in?
And that's a very, very good question. I do think that I was always interested in questions of administrative law and statutory interpretation. I had an amazing professor mentor when I was in law school, and perhaps that's the reason. Any professor who's excited about their work can really spark an interest in a student, and in particular a future academic. I didn't know at that moment that I would be an academic, but I certainly knew at that moment that I really loved administrative law and statutory interpretation. And frankly, my classmates thought I was weird. So, all right, I was the weird geeky one when I was in law school because I loved these areas of the law. But as I moved on in my life, my jobs took me to consider these issues in different ways, and I sort of sought those out. So even when I clerked, my biggest case involved an agency. When I selected a law firm practice, I picked a small telecommunications boutique. So that's administrative law and telecommunications law. The Office of Legal Counsel handles a lot of issues related to agencies and coordination among agencies and interface with the White House, and the Department of Justice itself is an agency, and the Office of Legal Counsel is an office within the Department of Justice. So I think my whole career, I've just sort of gravitated toward these issues. Probably, Bobby, I think sparked by my mentors in law school.
Do you still keep in touch with the people you met in law school or your mentors throughout?
Well, I do think that they are responsible for why I am here. And I hope that I continue to pay that forward by finding students who are excited about areas of the law and mentoring them through law school and thereafter, whether they decide to become an academic or practice or wherever their legal education takes them. I do stay in contact with them. They are famous, important, wonderful people. So I've been very fortunate in my career to have connected with some of the best legal minds I think ever. To the extent that I am in continuous conversation with these amazing, extraordinarily busy people, I don't want to oversell that, but I would say that yes, a mentoring network is a mentoring network forever.
And I remember you said earlier that you like teaching 1Ls. Can you just talk about that a little bit more? What about teaching 1Ls do you like?
Yeah, so you guys have had a little bit of law school U1Ls, but you haven't had Reg State. So it's hard for me to speak directly to your experience, but maybe I can tell you how I see it from my side, and you can see if there's flashes of recognition in what you've already begun to do. So the thing about 1Ls is there's never a time in law school that you're going to be more excited or more open-minded about what you're learning. And it's kind of amazing to jump in there. I use that word a lot, amazing, because what what I want to capture is that it's exciting and eye-opening, right? So it's not, it's never the same. It's always extraordinary to see a new group of 1Ls take in what I, as a professor, bring to the classroom. And that experience does not get replicated from the professor side as well as the law student side. You say sometimes, you know, you can't wait to be a 2L because of how scary it is to be a 1L. And then when you're a 2L, you say you can't wait to be a 3L because you're working so hard as a 2L. And then when you're a 3L, you say, why are we doing this? We should graduate. Everybody has an opinion about different years of law school. I love teaching upper class students and grab them and work them hard and then show them why they're still here. But 1Ls, yeah, love the 1L classroom.
And I guess with that, what advice would you give, you know, to incoming students or prospective students, regardless of, you know, kind of where they choose for law school, just in preparation for 1L year? What advice would you give?
I think that's a really good question. When I was a law student, everybody would read 1L by Scott Turow, which you may or may not do. It's terribly old by now. And that was intended to sort of scare you as you approached your 1L year. I think now, given the realities of the world, people are much more practical about their education. They want to know that they will get out of it what they put into it, that it will be an excellent investment, a way to spend of time, let alone financial resources. And so I think now the best way to prepare for law school is to read. I think you just need to kind of connect with the world and see what legal issues look like. Begin the process, if you've been away from it for a while, of careful analytical reading as opposed to breezy reading, which we do a lot of now. And sort of get yourself ready to think like a lawyer, to think in almost a different language than you've had before. Many of the concepts are the same. Many of the approaches, the analytical thinking, the writing, stuff you've been doing or have had to do in undergrad or in your jobs. But there's a special form, there's a special way. And so if you come in as a 1L ready to grab that and ask the questions and approach your professors and really immerse yourself in the experience, I think that's how you both prepare yourself and then get the most out of it once you've arrived.
And also, I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you view, I guess, students coming to you? Like, do you like having an open door policy, or what's kind of your take on that?
Yeah, Bobby, I should have you answer that question.
I know. Well, I didn't want to lead the question too much, but she's fantastic with having an open door policy. I mean, I remember last semester when we went on Zoom, I would just email you, be like, oh my gosh, I need office hours like right now. And she was always like more than willing to talk, even past like the issues we had in class. I just, you know, when I asked you reg state issues outside of the cases we were learning, you were still so open, and you really encouraged me to kind of read the cases over the summer. You were kind of that inspiration, because I enjoyed your class that much, to read the DACA case and Celia and actually look for, you know, your teachings and like interpretation and kind of how the justices go through their analysis. It's everything you taught us in class in practice, and that was, I thought, really cool. And I probably wouldn't have done that if you weren't so open with your open door policy and just asking you questions and kind of questioning, you know, myself and how I read, like why I read it this way. So that's kind of a long take on your open door policy.
Well, that's the best compliment, the best description any law professor could hope to have. So I thank you for that. Bobby was a fabulous reg state student. She didn't know it. So I went after her and I said, you know, you're really good at this. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, you're really good at this. And that started a whole different conversation, similar to the one that She and I just had about how did I get interested in administrative law? I mean, maybe that's it, right? Maybe somebody pulls you out and says, you know, you're really thinking nicely. And thinking nicely or thinking critically is very different from, you know, you got an A on the midterm. You know, the grades, people always think that their professors know them by their grades. Oh, well, there goes Miss B plus. I don't remember what grade I give you, but I do remember the interaction I've had with you in the classroom or in office hours. And that's what's of value to me. That's where I see the minds working. So I think what's important is to foster that sort of open door feeling. And the open door feeling, I think, starts in the classroom. If you can come back at me and say, I don't understand that, or I don't understand what my classmate said, or could you clarify that again? Or I think this might not be related, but I want to bring in this issue that I read about. Or, you know, I will say, think back to your contracts class, and everybody just forgets what they learned the previous semester, but the interactions, the overlap of the classes, that's important, and a way to integrate the material in your head so that we can have the kind of open conversation in which you don't have to, you know, show off your A+ self every time. I would rather see you take a chance. As long as you take a chance and come prepared, that none of this is an argument for not preparing. But as long as you're prepared, that's when the discussions soar. And honestly, in Reg State for 1Ls, having students come in prepared is really not an issue.
Yes, I remember so many times, you know, I provided the wrong answer or whatnot. And that's honestly when I think I learned the most.
And I often say that in class, just that very thing, that sometimes the wrong answer is more helpful to the class than the right answer. So this is where you're supposed to have it out. If you come in and you don't understand something you read the night before, the question is, did you understand it better when you walked out the door? There's no problem if you come in the door looking to class to do some work. In fact, that's excellent. So to me, that openness of discussion is what really matters. And in the classroom, outside of the classroom, the nice part about outside of the classroom is I think we can talk about other issues and get to know one another in a broader context. So that's always particularly special if those kinds of relationships develop. And I encourage every student, every single student, to approach every single one of your professors to develop mentoring contacts, because at least at Vanderbilt Law School, we're here for that. So you should take advantage of it.
And let's not forget your soup competition.
Right, and the soup competition. Yes, well, in our section last year, as Bobby knows, we sort of, the professors had a little bit of a competition, didn't they, about who could have the best student competition in their class. And so I guess in first semester in civil procedure, you had a baking contest that was to bake a cake related to one of the concepts in Civ Pro. Is that about accurate?
Yes.
And so it was a student bake-off. Well, in my class, we didn't want to repeat and do a student bake-off. That's been done. So we did a soup-off. We did a soup competition. And it wasn't so much related to the class. However, the class designed the rules. The class was the legislature and the agency that designed the soup competition. And the winning bill among the student submissions was the one that prescribed the rules for how our soup competition proceeded. And it was so much fun and so much soup, and so lucky that we had it just before COVID. I mean, right? First of all, that could have been a terrible disaster, all of us standing there over cauldrons of soup, but the opportunity to get to know one another in a soft competitive situation was so fun. So I'm really grateful that our semester permitted that before we all unfortunately had to turn remote in light of circumstances.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was the week leading into spring break, or it was right before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we worked out with that.
We were, I mean, nobody saw what was coming, but we were frankly super lucky that we didn't have significant spread in the U.S. at that time, because everybody with hands on all the utensils, and we didn't know to be careful in the way that we are now. So I think that was really just a bit of fortune for us in light of some pretty bad circumstances that were to come.
But I wanted to share that because I thought that was so cool about your class is you kind of gave us, that little break, but it was also, an application of applying these rules and making a bill and thinking, how did these legislatures like figure this out? Because there's so much to it. So that was something really cool, and I really appreciated that about
I'm
your.
glad. It was super fun, and if it was a little bit educational or related to class material, that's a good thing. I think it was important in a funny way, because a soup competition and coming up with the rules for what constitutes a soup, not everything does, right? Chowder, bouillon, who knows? But simple exercise like that is pretty hard. It's pretty challenging, and I think to sort of see that unfold in real time was pretty fun.
Was. But I kind of wanted to leave, I guess, these last few to the one else. If you have anything to say or ask Professor Bressman, this is your chance.
Yeah, so I had a question kind of tying the two last things we've talked about together. We were talking a little bit about how COVID really changed the face of what we can do now, and then mentorship as well. So I was wondering how you would suggest students maybe approach like trying to establish good relationships with their professors, and maybe have more in-depth discussions when that's a little bit more difficult now than it has been in the past, I would say.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background. I warned you, growling at the door. That COVID has changed everything, right? So I'm sitting here on a screen talking to you in a sweater in my house, and it does sort of change the sort of professional immersion and student contact and network building and mentorship. So I feel like the challenge is real, and I hope that you feel that we have succeeded in our efforts to be in person when we can and connected when we can't. So the way that I've dealt with it now, with Bobby's class, we were really lucky because we had half a semester together, so we sort of knew each other and we could build on that going on screen. With my 1Ls next semester, I won't have that luxury, and so we're going to have to work extra hard to figure out how to get to know one another. But I just hold a whole lot of Zoom calls, frankly, and the nice part, the unexpected part about Zoom has been the ability of as many students as want joining the call, joining the office hours. So to stuff students into a small faculty office space is one thing, but to be able to open up office hours to everyone who's interested and really stay on for as long as you want, that's an unexpected benefit. We sacrifice the in-person aspect of it, but we in a way get more time together, and more of us can take advantage of it. So I think we just have to commit to knowing one another in this space, recognizing that it's limited, but also just striving to learn about one another and push one another in the same ways that we've done in the classroom. So you won't see that in my section next semester because of how things shook out, but I hope that you're finding it to be true of the professors you have now and the ones that you have going forward, in the event that we are still doing a lot of this hybrid learning.
Definitely, yeah. With the other Professor Bressman, we're actually I think he's holding like small like coffee hour chat things, and that's been really beneficial, I think, to like establishing relationships. So yeah, I would
Great.
agree. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to say real fast? Okay. Well, Professor Bressman, thank you so much. Like, this has been so informative and so helpful. And it was just so nice to see you again.
I know, it's nice to see you too. I do miss that.
I know. But I do concur with what you say about Zoom. Even though it's not in person, it's so convenient. It's so much easier to get in contact with professors. And I've always found that every professor I've met or had was just so available via Zoom anytime.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. And we'll take the good with the bad. You know, we have to make the best of it. And if there are ways in which this kind of Zoom community works, then we are grateful for it.
Your dog is so
I'm going to go attend to the whining dog. I mean, that's what's surreal about all of it, right? Is there's no personal, professional divide anymore. You guys are invited to my home and my whining dog. But there it is. I'm a real person. And I think maybe I enjoy that aspect of it more so than you do. But that's where it is.
Okay, well, thank you just so much. And again, it was so nice to see you again.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.